Three security guards cornered the limping old man against the wall. "What's a useless old-timer like you gonna do?" The lead guard sneered. They had no idea they were taunting a former Delta Force operator with over 200 combat missions. Robert Wilson kept to himself as he navigated the crowded hallways of Westfield's shopping mall every Tuesday and Thursday. At 72, he was just another elderly man to most people, slightly stooped, with a noticeable limp and weather hands that occasionally tremble when tired. His silver hair was always neatly trimmed in a military-style cut, and behind his simple wire-rimmed glasses, his steel-blue eyes missed nothing. What no one at the mall knew, what almost no one in his civilian life ever knew, was that Robert had spent 30 years in the most elite special operations unit in the U.S. Army. As a former Delta Force operator, he had participated in classified missions across 3 continents, earned 5 Purple Hearts, and mastered combat techniques that could incapacitate opponents in seconds. After retiring from active duty, Robert had dedicated himself to helping fellow veterans navigate the often confusing system of benefits and support services. 3 years ago, he had convinced the mall management to donate a small office space for a Veterans Assistance Center, where he volunteered twice weekly to help veterans with paperwork, counseling referrals, and sometimes just lending an ear to those who needed to talk. True strength is knowing when not to fight had been his mantra throughout his military career. It was what he taught the younger operators under his command and what guided his civilian life now. Violence was always the last resort, used only when absolutely necessary. At home, Robert maintained his physical training regimen, modified for his age but still rigorous. His small apartment contained few decorations except for a folded flag in a display case and a single photograph of his old unit, faces blurred for security. He practiced martial arts forms every morning to maintain flexibility, despite his old combat injuries, and worked with weighted resistance bands to preserve his strength. The mall security team, led by the arrogant ex-cop Mike Brennan, had been a persistent annoyance since the Veterans Center opened. Robert had heard them mockingly call it the dinosaur exhibit when they thought no one was listening. But Robert had endured far worse during his career. He simply carried on with his work, helping one veteran at a time. Westfield Mall was a sprawling 2-story complex of gleaming tiles, bright storefronts, and ambient music. The Veterans Assistance Center occupied a modest space next to a service corridor, far from the prime locations. The small sign on the door read, "Simply Veterans Assistance," in plain black letters, a stark contrast to the colorful, backlit displays of surrounding stores. Mike Brennan and his security team operated from a high-tech office near the mall's main entrance. At 45, Mike carried himself with the swagger of someone who believed a polyester uniform and a radio made him untouchable. His team consisted of 4 younger men, all with similar attitudes, particularly his deputies, Jason and Connor, who seemed eager to impress their boss with increasingly aggressive enforcement of mall regulations. The first incident occurred when Robert was helping an older Vietnam veteran with mobility issues navigate to the center. The man had accidentally knocked over a promotional display outside a cosmetic store. "Hey, Grandpa," Jason called out, approaching rapidly. "Can't you watch where you're going?" Robert helped steady his companion. "It was an accident. We'll help clean it up." Mike appeared, arms crossed over his chest. "We've got mall staff for that. Maybe if you can't see where you're going, you shouldn't be here at all." Robert noticed the Vietnam veteran's face flush with embarrassment. "Everyone deserves to be treated with respect," Robert said calmly, making direct eye contact with Mike. "Especially those who serve their country." Mike snorted. "Yeah. Well, this isn't the army, old man. This is my mall, and I say you need to move along before you break something else." Robert felt his jaw tighten but maintained his composure. He gently guided the Vietnam veteran toward the center. "Come on, Jim. Let's get your paperwork sorted out." As they walked away, Robert heard Jason laugh. "Can you believe these old-timers? Acting like limping around in uniform 50 years ago makes them special." Robert absorbed the insult without reaction. During his career, he had endured silent infiltrations behind enemy lines, maintaining absolute stillness for days when necessary. He could certainly handle the disrespect of mall security guards. Still, something in their dismissive attitude bothered him more than he cared to admit. Not for himself, but for veterans like Jim who had already endured too much disrespect upon returning home decades ago. Back in the center, Robert helped Jim complete his benefit application forms, all while mentally filing away the encounter with security. Simply another observation, as he'd been trained to do. Over the next 2 weeks, the tension with the security team steadily increased. They began performing routine checks of the Veteran Center multiple times a day, questioning credentials of veterans who came seeking help, and finding trivial violations of mall regulations to cite. Your informational flyers are blocking the fire exit path, Connor claimed, removing the center's modest display from the wall outside their door. That approved sign has been there for 3 years, Robert pointed out. New management, new rules. Connor smirked, wadding up the flyers and tossing them into the trash. The following day, Mike informed Robert that veterans could no longer use the mall's main entrance near the parking area most accessible for those with disabilities. Security concerns, he said with a shrug that didn't attempt to disguise his satisfaction. You'll need to direct your visitors to use the service entrance near the loading docks. Robert recognized the tactic. The steady application of pressure designed to make the center's operations so difficult that they would leave voluntarily. He'd seen similar approaches during counterinsurgency operations, though never expected to experience it in a suburban American mall. The situation came to a head when Robert arrived one morning to find the center's lock changed. Mike stood nearby with his arms crossed. Fire marshal inspection found some violations, he said. Space is temporarily closed. Without notice? That's not protocol, Robert replied, his voice leveled despite his rising anger. Look, Wilson. Mike stepped closer, lowering his voice. Let's cut the crap. This mall isn't charity. Your sad little operation takes up valuable space and drives away real customers. Nobody wants to go shopping and be reminded of war and broken down old soldiers. Robert felt a familiar calm settle over him. The combat clarity he'd experienced in crises throughout his career. Those broken down old soldiers gave everything for people like you. Mike laughed, a harsh sound that echoed in the quiet morning corridor. What exactly did you give? Old man, besides wasting taxpayer money playing soldier? I've dealt with real danger as a cop. You military types love to act superior with your service talk. Robert simply looked at him. Decades of discipline, keeping his expression neutral despite the disrespect. He could have mentioned classified operations that had directly protected American citizens. He could have shown the scars from bullets and shrapnel. Instead, he simply turned to leave. That's right, limp away. Jason called after him. Just like you guys limped away from Nam, right? Robert continued walking, his tactical mind already evaluating options and planning his next move. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. 2 days later, Robert received an urgent call from a young Afghanistan veteran named Marcus. The 28-year-old had been making progress with his PTSD, but today was struggling with a severe anxiety attack and needed to talk. Robert told him to come to the center immediately, then headed to the mall himself. When he arrived, he found Marcus sitting on a bench near the mall entrance, visibly agitated, rocking slightly, his breathing rapid, hands clenching and unclenching. Before Robert could reach him, Mike and Jason approached, security radios crackling. Sir, you're disturbing other customers, Mike said to Marcus. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Robert quickened his pace. He's here to see me at the Veteran Center. He's having a medical issue. Your center is closed, remember? Mike replied, without looking at Robert. And this guy is scaring people. Marcus's breathing was becoming more erratic. I just need a minute, he gasped. You need to leave, Jason insisted, reaching for Marcus's arm. Don't touch him, Robert warned, his voice dropping to a register that made both security guards pause momentarily. He's experiencing a PTSD episode. Physical contact without permission could trigger a survival response. Mike snorted. More military drama. Listen, Grandpa, this isn't your territory. This man is creating a disturbance. When Jason grabbed Marcus's arm, the young veteran reacted instinctively, pulling away with a panicked cry. Mike immediately shoved Marcus against the wall, while Jason drew his stun gun. Stop, Robert commanded, but was ignored. As Marcus's panic escalated, Robert made his decision. Decades of training took over as he moved with a speed that belied his age. In one fluid motion, Robert struck the pressure point at Jason's wrist, causing the stun gun to clatter to the floor. Before Jason could register what happened, Robert had redirected his momentum and sent him sprawling with a subtle hip check. Mike released Marcus and lunged at Robert, swinging wildly. Robert sidestepped with the economy of movement that characterized elite operators, using Mike's own force to guide him face first into the wall. With a joint lock that immobilized him instantly, Connor appeared, rushing toward the commotion. Robert, still controlling Mike with one hand, used his free hand to catch Connor's punch and redirect it into a wrist-control position that brought the younger man to his knees, gasping in pain but without lasting injury. Within 10 seconds, all 3 security guards were incapacitated. Mike pinned against the wall, Jason sprawled on the floor, and Connor kneeling in a wrist lock. None were seriously hurt, simply controlled with precision that had made Delta operators legendary. "When I release you," Robert said quietly, his voice steady despite not even breathing hard, "you will step back, allow me to take my friend to get help, and reconsider how you treat veterans in the future. Are we clear?" The security guard stared at him with shocked expressions, suddenly seeing not a limping old man, but a warrior whose decades of combat experience had just been demonstrated with frightening efficiency. By the following morning, mall employee group chats were buzzing with security footage of the incident. The video, captured by the mall surveillance cameras, showed with perfect clarity how an elderly man with a limp had neutralized 3 younger security guards in seconds, with movements so efficient they seemed almost casual. The mall's regional manager arrived for an emergency meeting with Robert. Unlike Mike's dismissive attitude, Mrs. Calloway was profusely apologetic. "Mr. Wilson, I had no idea about the harassment your center has experienced. The behavior of our security team was completely unacceptable." She slid a folder across the desk. "We'd like to offer the Veteran Center a new location, twice the size, near the main entrance at the same donated terms." Robert accepted the offer with a simple nod. "It's not about me. It's about respecting all veterans who come here for help." Word spread quickly throughout the mall. Store managers who had previously ignored Robert now greeted him by name. Several approached him with offers of discounts for veterans or to donate products to the center. The most surprising development came 3 days later when Mrs. Calloway requested another meeting. This time, Mike was present, looking distinctly uncomfortable. "Mr. Brennan has something to say," Mrs. Calloway prompted. Mike cleared his throat. "The company has placed me on probation, and rightfully so. My behavior was unprofessional and disrespectful." He seemed to struggle with the next words. "We also reviewed your military record, or what's available of it. I had no idea who you really were." Robert remained impassive. "Few people do. That's how I prefer it." Mrs. Calloway suggested, and I agreed, that the security team could benefit from some training. Mike continued, specifically in how to de-escalate situations involving veterans with PTSD or other service-related conditions. "Would you consider conducting a workshop for us?" Robert studied the man's face, seeing genuine regret replacing the previous arrogance. "I believe in second chances," he said finally. "First session starts Monday at 0800. Don't be late." As Mike left, Robert allowed himself a small smile. Sometimes the most effective teaching required a practical demonstration first. The security training sessions became a weekly occurrence. Robert taught the guards about various combat-related conditions, proper de-escalation techniques, and how to recognize veterans in distress. To his surprise, Mike proved to be an attentive student, often staying after sessions to ask detailed questions. After the 4th session, Mike lingered until they were alone. "I never served," he admitted abruptly. "Tried to enlist after high school, but was rejected on medical grounds. Spent my whole life compensating, I guess." He stared at his hands. "Became a cop to prove something, but washed out after 3 years. Ended up in mall security." Robert nodded, understanding the complex emotions behind the confession. Many paths to service exist. Not all require a uniform. "That young man, Marcus, how's he doing?" Mike asked. "Better. He's helping at the center now, mentoring other recent returnees." Mike looked up, resolve in his expression. "I'd like to help too, if you'll have me, maybe set up a regular security escort service for veterans with mobility issues? No charge, of course. Over the following weeks, a remarkable transformation occurred. The security team, once the center's adversaries, became its strongest advocates. Mike personally cleared the regulatory hurdles for the center's expansion and organized a mall-wide Veterans Appreciation Day. For the first time in years, Robert felt he was witnessing the kind of understanding between civilians and veterans that he had always hoped to foster, not through his combat skills, but through the harder path of forgiveness and education. 6 months later, the Westfield Mall Veterans Assistance Center had become a model program being replicated in shopping centers across the state. Robert's calm guidance had transformed not just the mall's approach to veterans, but had rippled outward into broader community. At 72, Robert Wilson had never sought recognition for his decades of service, most of which would remain classified until long after his death. But as he watched veterans of all ages find support and respect within the community, he found a different kind of satisfaction than any mission had provided. True strength, he reflected, watching Mike patiently assist an elderly Vietnam veteran with his walker, wasn't found in the ability to defeat opponents. It was found in the courage to change minds and open hearts. If you've ever witnessed someone standing up for what's right, or if you know a veteran with an untold story of strength, share your respect in the comments below. Our elderly veterans deserve our recognition and gratitude.